All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Chuck Holton here, coming to you from the kitchen today in Von Nadzor because the baby just got home. Our new grandson got home from the hospital this morning, and it is apparently an Armenian thing that when you bring a new baby home, everybody comes over and has a party. So they're having a party in the room where I normally do my lives, and that's why I'm relegated to the kitchen tonight, but that's okay. So thank you very much for being with us. I appreciate all of you, and I hope that you are doing well. Please hit me up with your location. Let me know where you're coming in from, and put that in the chat over there. Now, we've got a lot to talk about tonight, as usual. The uh, government of Israel has about made up their minds that they're going to completely take over Gaza and occupy Gaza, actually do what they've been uh, accused of doing for a long time. They've obviously, you've heard about the illegal occupation of Gaza. Well, that since 2005, there haven't been any Israeli troops in Gaza except for very short periods of time. They left Gaza completely and gave it to the Gazans. Well, that looks like it may be no more. So we're going to talk about the ramifications of this, the potential costs, the dissension in the ranks, not just between Israelis. There are some Jewish New Yorkers who were like 41 of them were arrested last night at a protest in New York City. Matter of fact, let's show you that and let you see what that looks like. Now, I'm going to let you listen in on this protest, but I may stop it. We may not listen to the whole thing because it's kind of makes me sick.
Jews can never know true safety as long as Palestinians remain in danger. The only true safety is shared safety.
Wait, what? Okay, what? What does she mean by that? Jews cannot be safe unless everybody is safe. Well, then Jews will never be safe. Because if the Palestinians are left to their own devices, they're going to try to kill Jews again. This is the thing about left-wing protesters is they live in this Pollyannic pie in the sky world where you can just will something into existence because they don't believe in objective truth. They believe it's true that there is no truth. So their worldview commits suicide on its face, and they can believe anything. So they can lead themselves to believe that, oh, if only we just gave him hugs and not bullets, everything would be fine. Well, you know what? Many of the people who were killed on October 7th felt that way too, right up until the point where they were being murdered or raped or burned by Hamas terrorists and Palestinians, because there were a lot of Palestinians who were not part of Hamas, uh, who came into Israel on October 7th and committed heinous atrocities. I just found a clip yesterday of a Palestinian dude, not a Hamas guy, beheading an elderly uh, Jewish man on October 7th. Not just killing them, but desecrating them. And I mean, this is the level of the hatred that they have. So this protester is like, oh, we can't be safe until everybody is safe. There's no such thing as true safety. Well, that's just not how the real world works, sweetheart. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes you've got to use violence to solve problems. And it's sad, it's tragic, but I remember reading a book when I was a kid that really cemented this in my mind. And there was a quote in the book where he said that some people only speak the language of death and destruction. And so for those people, that is the language you must speak to them in. And I think that Palestinians in Gaza are the perfect poster child example of that sentiment. They only understand force and violence. Now, there's lots of little kids in there. They're sweet little kids, and I feel terrible for them. And they hopefully will be able to be raised in a culture that is throwing off the chains of slavery to hatred that they have been raised under so far in their lives. And I think the guys that are passing out food at the Gaza Humanitarian Fund locations are starting to do that. They're starting to change those kids' mind a little bit because, you know, think about it. The vast majority of people who live in Gaza have never met an American. They know Americans exist, and they've been taught to hate them. So Americans are this enemy other, this terrible, monstrous people, and they are to be hated and to be killed if possible. That's what they've been taught from day one in school all the way up. And since most of them have never met an American, that's how they think. But the Gaza Humanitarian Fund is doing something that no other agency is doing, and that is bringing in Americans to give out the aid to these people. Today, they passed out 1.7 million meals. Look, there cannot be starvation in Gaza if they're passing out a couple million meals a day. That doesn't even count the aid that's being brought in by other agencies. Okay, they've had, I think, 9 countries now airdrop aid onto Gaza, and the grand total amount of aid that was dropped was probably less than 5 semi-truck worth of aid. But you know, it was a spectacularly expensive piece of political theater, as most of them are. But still, and actually, several people were crushed to death by falling pallets of aid. But that's just the way it goes. That's the price that Belgium and the UAE and everybody is willing to pay so that they can score their social justice points, right? We're more moral because we're airdropping aid on top of these people. Now, but there's plenty of aid getting into the Strip, and I'll show you in just a minute. First, I want to show you the reaction that Palestinian kids are having to meeting and getting to know guys, American soldiers who are working for the GHF. These are retired American troops who are working as contractors in Gaza, and the kids are coming every day, and they have special areas set aside for women and children so that they can get food without the mad rush of the military age males that are tearing everything apart. And so these kids come over and start to practice their English. They start to learn some English and practice it on these troops. So listen to this. This is so sweet.
English. America. صور يا صور Photo.
Giving him a hug. Did you see the guy with the American flag on there? These are armed guys, and they're wearing the American flag. So these are kids. These are school-age kids. I mean, these kids have been taught to hate Jews and Americans since they started going to school, but they had never met one before. And now they got a chance to meet some of them, and their minds are being changed. We saw the same thing happen in Afghanistan. There were tons of people in Afghanistan, obviously, who had never met an American, for sure. And when the invasion, or not the invasion, but when the United States kicked out the Taliban and then spent 20 years trying to build a Jeffersonian democracy in Afghanistan, what happened was, over the course of 20 years, kids that were little when the Americans showed up grew up with Americans around, American soldiers around. And one thing I noticed is that after a few years of the war, probably about 2000, I don't know, 9, 10, something like that, you started to see these teenagers who had grown up with Americans around, and they were starting to roll their hats the same way that the American soldiers did. That was something you didn't see at the beginning. They were starting to work out in the gym and try to get big muscles like all the American soldiers, because before that, all the Afghan men were this big around. So that kind of cultural interchange, what it shows you is that the United States flag, as one general said, I wrote it into one of my books, I forget which general it was, but he said, the American flag has never flown over any country but in blessing. And I don't know how you feel about that. I think that there have certainly been times when the American flag has done things that were not moral. I'm thinking of back in, years past, when Americans went in and basically just, our foreign policy was go in and machine gun the little brown people and bring order, and then, things will be better off. So like places like Haiti and Cuba and not Cuba, Haiti and Panama and places like that. But nevertheless, I think that on balance, every troop I ever met when I was embedded with troops in Afghanistan and Iraq felt like they were there. They didn't have hatred for the Iraqi or Afghan people. They certainly had hatred for the guys who were shooting at them and had no problem, shooting back. But they're good American boys, and they just they wanted to make the world a better place. And that is what GHF is doing in Gaza. Now, there's a lot of controversy surrounding GHF, and that's by design as far as the leftists are concerned. And Hamas is stoking that dissension. But in the greater scheme of things, you see those kids and how they reacted to those Americans, and that wasn't staged. Okay, you're not going to stage that. Unlike the hunger campaign, much of which was staged. Actually, I saw a picture today of a photographer lining kids up and giving them their bowls and everything so that he could take a picture of them acting like they were hungry. So are Gazans actually hungry? I mean, they're still saying, Hamas is saying, we're not going to negotiate. We're going to starve your hostages until we get 1,000 truckloads of aid into Gaza every day. Now, if you do the math, they need about 100, 120 trucks a day to feed everybody in Gaza. Hamas wants 10 times that brought in. And they're not going to give enough food to the hostages until they get more aid brought in. However, we're starting to see these videos come out. I mean, not starting to, they've been the whole time. Actually, Kogat, the Israeli organization that's in charge of getting aid into Gaza, put out a video today, and I couldn't find it. I would have showed it to you, of marketplaces just full of fresh fruits and vegetables and meats and canned goods and everything. Just a huge marketplace in Gaza full of stuff for sale. But that's not as egregious as this, because this, remember, the mainstream media, if you do a search right now for, on Google, Google News for Gaza, 9 out of 10 stories you see are going to be about the famine in Gaza and how people are still starving to death, and the aid that's being brought in is too little, too late, and these people are starving to death. Well, take a look at this guy and tell me what you think. This came out today, all right? And it's an ad that was put online for Gazans to bring them to this guy's restaurant for a special Friday thing. And I did you the courtesy of translating the Arabic into English. And Arabic's a real flowery language, so some of the things are going to be where he's saying, "Oh, my eyes, my father," stuff like that. That doesn't make a lot of sense to us in English, but this is I translated it just directly to English so you can hear what he was saying. Take a listen.
Oh, after. Prayers upon the Prophet. Oh, Allah bless our Master Muhammad. I repeat, the meal is as it is prepared. How much is the meal like this?
Not for 50 or 40, but instead for 25 shekels. This offer is for today, Friday. The meal, this offer, let's say for Friday, 25 shekels for the meal, and my mother took me out. Oh God, my son, sir, teacher, my eyes, oh gentlemen, your prayers, Al Jawziyah Center, mashallah, Sultan neighborhood.
No, I won't, my friend. Everyone, good morning.
Take a picture of your condolences, teacher. I am in the tower, teacher. Hopefully it will be ready soon. For those calling us, they will find sheep, courage, and differences. We will satisfy you tomorrow, God willing, with meals, heads, and offspring, and the offer continues until tomorrow, Friday. The price of the meal is 25 shekels upon reservation.
So actually, that came out last Thursday, apparently, because he's saying tomorrow, Friday, but it hasn't been uploaded until today. They're selling that meal, which is a tin full of meat, fried meat, with some vegetable soup or some kind of soup next to it, and that's 25 shekels is about $7 US. I don't. I mean, it that kind of makes me go like, whoa, $7. That's not cheap. And it's going to be hard for those guys to compete with free, since there's so much free aid coming into Gaza right now. But as many of you are saying in the chat here, yeah, that guy's not hungry. He's not starving. That guy could stand to starve just a little bit more, I think. So if there's famine in Gaza, it did not reach wherever that guy lives. And so it just is mind-blowing that you watch these Jews in New York saying that there's a genocide happening in Gaza, this ethnic cleansing happening in Gaza. Ethnic cleansing is driving out all the people from their homeland. Well, the Gazans themselves don't call Gaza their homeland, but they're not being driven out of there. They're being moved around because there's combat operations taking place in Gaza, but they're not being driven out. So that's not ethnic cleansing. And we'll talk more about the death toll in a minute, but suffice it to say, it certainly is not genocide by any stretch whatsoever. You cannot call what you were seeing in Gaza genocide. It just cheapens the worth of that word to call what's happening in Gaza genocide. It cheapens the Holocaust that many of those people's ancestors suffered through, to call what's happening in Gaza a genocide. But these are leftist liberal Jews. And I don't know. I mean, how stupid do you have to be jumping up and down, going after your own government, trying to get them to surrender to a bunch of terrorists? Because that's exactly what they're doing. They're having these protests in Tel Aviv as well, but they're taking a little different tone all of a sudden. When that video came out of the Israeli hostages being starved to death, and I'm going to show it to you because their parents have asked it to be shown. It's actually being shown in Times Square in New York City on a huge screen now. the video of this guy, that one of the two hostages that they showed in the videos, who is just starving to death. So I've got an interview that was done in Hebrew with, his name is Ophir Braslavsky. He's the father of Ram Braslavsky, one of the two hostages, that they did with him in his home, and how he feels about it. And I want you to listen specifically to what he says about what he thinks the IDF should do right now to try to save his son. Take a listen.
You see your child, no need to talk, like you see your child dying in front of you before your eyes and you can't do anything. It's maddening. There's nothing unbearable. There's nothing you can do. Like, at least let the Red Cross in, let them give him treatment. At least, first of all, keep him alive. Then see if, I even said that they should do a rescue because he's going to die anyway. All the doctors.
So I just want to pause it right there, because he's saying the IDF should attempt a rescue because he's going to die anyway. So he will probably die in a rescue attempt, but it's worth a try because they're going to kill him one way or the other. And I think finally, many people who have been swayed by the famine argument, the hunger argument, the genocide argument, all that stuff in Gaza, are starting to see the light when they see these images of these hostages being starved to death. They realize these are monsters, and there's very little chance we're going to get our hostages back alive. So do what you have to do. Try to save them, please, but go ahead and attempt a rescue, and hopefully they can get the Red Cross in there too. I'll keep listening.
Doctors and all the professionals said that, those who understand, not me, that it's a matter of a few days. He doesn't have much time left. He can't hold on much longer. This is torture. He has the corpses on his body. Yeah, he has. He's undergoing torture, in short, and torture. And he is a strong boy. He is a boy who, it seems, she lost it. But I say, like always, that hold on a little longer, ensure a little more, that he must be strong just a bit more.
So heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking to listen to that. I can't imagine the suffering that father is going through, watching his boy wasting away after more than 669 days in Gaza, and knowing that there's nothing you can do. Like, I'm a warrior, you know. I would want to be like, give me a weapon. I'm going into Gaza and I'm going to tear that place apart. I'm going to lead. I will machine gun whole villages of people. I don't care. If it was my son, that would be like, I'm a man of action. I want to do something, and you can't. He can't do anything. He's just got to leave it up to the IDF and the vagaries of the politics and everything else. But one thing that they're starting to realize is that these guys are not going to come out of here alive. And so we might as well try to, get them out if we can. Now, I want you to listen to, I told you that the protests in Tel Aviv are taking a little different tack, not outright calling for, there still are actually quite a few that are calling for Israel to just stop fighting and leave Gaza. And somehow they think that will get the hostages back. Well, I'm here to tell you, if you actually think Hamas would release the hostages after those hostages have gotten Hamas so many concessions, there's 121 countries that are talking about recognizing Palestine as a nation now. And Hamas sees a direct line. This is a direct result of October 7th and them taking those hostages. So if anything, they want to take more hostages. They've been rewarded for taking the hostages. And yeah, AJ Ward says there's already a $5 million reward out for information leading to the safe return of any of the hostages. And nobody has taken them up on that. It makes it hard to feel sorry for people in Gaza. And again, we're going to talk more about what all this means in a minute. But listen to this speaker at a protest in Tel Aviv and what he's saying.
The humanitarian aid flowing into Gaza, meant to alleviate suffering, must reach Eviatar, Guy, and all the other hostages immediately.
Okay, so again, being a left-wing protester, I'm assuming because he's at a left-wing rally, he's saying that food has got to go in immediately. And the insinuation there is that Israel could somehow get that aid into those hostages. Like, he's not talking to Hamas so much. He's talking to the IDF. And this just is a staggering lack of understanding of how real life actually works, not just war, but just real life in general.
We cannot, we must not allow Hamas to wield life and death with such unchecked barbarity.
So what would you have to do to stop them? Maybe, I don't know, invade Gaza and root out Hamas and kill them all? Shoot them in the face? That's how real life works. So it's amazing to me. This guy's at a left-wing rally, and these are the people who are there. Many people he's talking to are saying that Israel needs to lose the war. Israel needs to just stop fighting and walk away. And somehow that'll get the hostages out. But it's just amazing that he's saying Hamas has to be dealt with.
To remain silent now is to be complicit in their slow, agonizing death.
So, okay, what do you want us to do? I mean, I can see, I just imagine all the soldiers in Gaza just going like, oh my gosh. You know, being a soldier, obviously, I can feel for those guys. And, you know, those guys are going, what do you think we've been here trying to do for 600 days? I mean, what do you think that the IDF is doing in Gaza? We're doing exactly what you're saying has to be done. Or at least we're trying. We're doing our dead level best at this point. And we have lost more than 450 of our soldiers in this invasion of Gaza. This is not, there's been more than that who died since October 7th, because there were over 300 that were killed, soldiers who were killed on October 7th. But 450 men went into Gaza, fought Hamas, and died as a result, trying to release those hostages. What do you want from them? I mean, really? Do you really think that if they pack up and go home, Hamas is going to go, oh, okay, well, we don't need these hostages anymore, and just let them loose? No, of course not. Those guys will be there for the rest of their miserable short lives if they aren't starved to death or executed or tortured to death. I mean, remember, this didn't start with October 7th, the hostage taking. Gazans have been taking Israeli hostages for decades, and there have been hostages who have spent more than 10 years in Gaza as hostages. Can you imagine 10 years of your life like that? So it's so frustrating to watch these leftists who are so clueless that they actually think that you could just walk away from Hamas and then they'll be nice. That they just need hugs. They need security. As long as they have security, they'll be fine. No, they won't be fine. They're going to keep killing Jews because that is their worldview. That's all they want. They don't even care if their own people get killed. They only want to kill Jews. So, you know, there's only one way to deal with people like that. And it's through force. It's through strike. So, all right. Now, I want to go and talk to you about what the likelihood is. Before I do that, we got 2,600 people watching, folks. Do me a favor. Take a second right now while I take a breath and go hit that like button. and make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. So I'll be right back. I'm going to get a glass of water, and you hit the like button while I go get a bottle of water here. Okay. Okay. So did you hit the like button? All you have to do is just, boop, just hit it. It's easy. And that's a great way to help us grow the channel. Make sure that you are subscribed as well, and you can get notified before we go live like this. Okay. So, and if you're asking questions, I will get to your questions. We put the questions over on another sheet that I go look up toward the end, and I will answer those questions at the end. So you have to stick around if you want your question answered. I mean, I'll answer it. You can come back and watch it later if you're not here. But and thank you to all of you who are asking questions, and especially those who are donating. I saw PC said pray for a miracle in there. That's very kind of you, PC. Thank you for that. So let's talk about costs now. What does it mean, first of all? Well, first, let's talk about the death toll. There was a new report that was released by the Gaza Health Ministry, and they say that 60,198 people have died in Gaza due to IDF violence. That 60,000 people have died since the war started in Gaza. Strangely enough, again, they claim that every one of these deaths is attributable to the IDF, whether dropping a bomb or shooting at them or whatever. However, it appears that that since October 7th, there has been exactly 0 natural deaths that have taken place in Gaza. It's a miracle. I mean, look, 2.2 million people. There's a lot of old people in that group. And there are people who are sick and who have cancer and who need chemotherapy or dialysis, all sorts of stuff. And so in a regular peacetime world, a portion of those 2.2 million people would die in what are we up to now? 22 months? In a 22-month period? So I asked chat, how many people could be expected to die in a country like Gaza over the course of 22 months of natural causes? Old age, cancer, diabetes, whatever, heart disease, etc. Looks like some of those shopkeepers might be right up there in the risk factors for both diabetes and heart disease. Actually, starving those guys would save their lives, likely, would actually put years back on their lives. Anyway, the answer that chat came up with, figuring out with a population of 2.2 million people and assuming an average death rate of 8 per 1,000 per year, which is normal for a low to middle income country. So the crude death rate would run about 32,000 people in Gaza over the last 22 months. Just if Israel had not gone, if October 7th hadn't happened, they would have had about 32,000 people die of old age in the last 22 months. Well, so, all right, let's subtract that from the 60,000 who they say died. And then we can look at the overall demographic breakdown of those that were were killed. And actually, this is using numbers that were put out by the Gaza Health Ministry. So you can't really trust those numbers very well. So, for example, they could easily classify a lot of young men as children when in reality, those guys are Hamas fighters. An 18-year-old Hamas fighter, and we've seen Hamas fighters in this war as young as 13. So the numbers could easily be skewed, and they say, oh, look at the number of children that are being killed in Gaza. They say that between 0 and 17, ages 0 to 17, 10,655 boys have been killed since October 7th. And that represents about 17.7% of the total death list that they came out with, 60 plus thousand people. Now, how many of those boys do you suppose were, I mean, if you had to guess, were between 15 and 18 years old? I would say far more than half, most likely, of that 10,000 number, if that number is even anywhere near accurate. The largest group of people, almost half of the total number of people who the Gaza Health Ministry says have been killed in Gaza, are military-age males between the ages of 18 and 59, 45.81%. Well, if you take just that number and say, okay, so in a normal 22 months time period, 32,000 people would have died of old age. And the Gaza Health Ministry says 27,577 men have died in Gaza since the war started. Well, you're almost up to 60,000 right there. I mean, you're getting real close. So if that's the case, now I would assume that because Gaza is at war and there are lots of there's lots of hardship, suffering, no electricity, difficult to get clean water. They're being forced to move around as the fighting shifts from north to south and back again. That there would be actually more natural deaths, meaning more aged people who normally would have been sitting comfortably in a nice air-conditioned house. And so they, are not under a lot of stress. Would not have died, but they died of whatever their aged, their ailments are, heart disease, diabetes, all those things. Because they died a little earlier than they otherwise would have. So I guess what I'm pointing out here is that it would be pretty easy to come up with 60,000 dead people in Gaza who were either military-age males, which means they're probably fighting the IDF, because the IDF isn't running around shooting at each other, right? All of these firefights and all of the IEDs, and I mean, Hamas puts out videos of military-age males every day, shooting mortars, shooting rocket-propelled grenades, running up and throwing grenades at tanks, stuff like that. So we know that the majority of those being killed in Gaza are probably going to be military-age males. And the numbers bear that out. But what they don't bear out, what these numbers don't show, is that there are a lot of people who would have died anyway. And they don't count any of those people in these numbers. Apparently, nobody died of natural causes for the last 22 months in Gaza. Folks, these are the numbers that you're seeing in the news. These are the numbers that are being reported on CNN. These are the numbers being reported on the AP. And this is the reason why you're seeing otherwise intelligent people saying that there's a genocide in Gaza, because they're looking at these numbers, but they're not looking close enough at these numbers. Does that make sense? Okay, so one last thing I just wanted to get to. Israel's launching a full occupation of Gaza. And So what does that actually mean? Well, right now they control almost 70%, I believe, 70-ish% of Gaza. And in those areas that they control, the Gazans are not allowed to go. Israel is saying we're going to take over the other 25% of Gaza where all of the Gazans are. And that means that we are going to be an occupying force in Gaza for the foreseeable future. Now, this has caused some consternation, to say the least, among high-level leaders of the IDF. As a matter of fact, the head of the IDF, I've just spaced on his name, is talking about, the top general is talking about possibly resigning not because he doesn't think it's a worthwhile endeavor, but because he thinks it's going to just be too expensive in terms of blood and treasure. So not everybody's on board with this plan, to say the least. However, it looks like the Israeli government is going to go forward with it. And they're going to take over the rest of Gaza, hold every street corner, everywhere in Gaza. And that is going to lead to more conflict and likely dead hostages. So what you're seeing with this decision is that the Israeli government is finally coming to the understanding that this is just not going to end. We're not going to get our hostages back. So it's time to just go for it. Hopefully we can rescue a few of them. We know most of them are going to be killed, but we can't just draw this out and make it a war of attrition, because Hamas is winning the war of attrition with help from their friends in the mainstream media. So what will this cost? And this got me going down a bunch of rabbit holes, but I tried to, looked at a bunch of different articles about it where they're working out what this could cost. And they're saying that to occupy Gaza, to take over the last 25%, could cost about $30 billion, $32 billion. And that's a lot. That's expensive for Jewish taxpayers, for sure. But what's the alternative? Not take over the rest of Gaza and just let your hostages rot or starve to death? So Israel's saying, well, we're going to have to bear this cost. And once we have taken over Gaza, then we as the occupiers will be responsible for the safekeeping and the education and the care and the medical care, everything, garbage pickup, you name it, for all of Gaza. So essentially what they're saying is there's been a lot of talk about what happens on the day after the war. Who takes over Gaza? Well, it can't be Hamas. So they've talked about bringing in a peacekeeping force from other Arab countries. They've talked about the Palestinian Authority taking over. Now Israel's saying, no, none of that is on the table. We are going to manage Gaza from here on out. Hamas actually came out with a statement today and said, we don't want to govern Gaza anymore, but we're not going to give up our weapons or our hostages, and we're going to keep fighting Israel. So what they're talking about is they're just going to resort to an insurgency from now on in Gaza, which is it's a war of attrition. It's death by 1,000 cuts. And that means that more Israeli soldiers will die. A lot more Israeli money is going to be spent. And Israel will be on the hook for managing the rebuilding of Gaza. Now, how much could that cost? As I've said, I believe that the United States will likely end up bearing a significant portion of the cost to rebuild Gaza. Why? I have no idea. We have no interest at all in rebuilding Gaza. And truly, neither does Israel. Israel should just go in, clear the rest of Gaza. When they've ascertained that there are no more living hostages left to save, be like, okay, we're done, and just walk away and let somebody else take over the rebuilding process. But that's not what they're saying they're going to do now. they're saying they're going to have to manage the rebuilding. Well, the rebuilding could easily top $150 billion easily. No, I mean, not even just a little bit. Minimum 75 billion, but really more like it, 100 to 150 billion dollars. Everything always costs twice as much as you think. Now, I want you to contrast that with the estimates for rebuilding Ukraine after the war that's been going on for 3 years there. And you're talking about a very large country that has been bombed every night, that has significant portions of the country that have been flattened like Gaza. Okay. And this is a country of 40 million people, not 2.2 million. But the estimate is that it would cost 486 billion to rebuild Ukraine and 100 to 150 billion to rebuild just Gaza. What are they going to make Gaza into? I mean, they could bulldoze everything and set up tents and say, there you go. That's what we're going to provide you. There is no international law anywhere that says Israel is going to be on the hook to rebuild Gaza to the standards of living that the Israelis have, to, a modern Western country. Gaza was not that before the war. Israel doesn't have any obligation to make it that after the war. Does that make sense? Okay, so I want to go over, there's a lot more I could go into there, but let's leave it at that so I can get to your questions. I don't know how many questions we've got yet today, so I got to go look that up. Here's my questions. All right. Again, make sure you hit that like button, folks. It really does help. Please go over, there's a video that was put up, and I'm sure the mods can put a link to it in the chat. There's a video that I put up celebrating going over 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. And we're doing a giveaway over there. So if you want to be entered in the running for the free books and things like that we're talking about giving out, go over to that video and make a comment on it so that you can be in the running. And Amy is going to announce the winners of that over at chuckholton.com in a few days. By the way, if you're not a member over at chuckholton.com, please go take a look. There's a lot of extra content we put up over there and stuff that I think you will like. And you get first dibs on trips with me and calls with me. We've got a call coming up, I think on Saturday, where we do a Zoom call where you can get on with me and we can chat face to face. That's for our supporters over at chuckholton.com. So go check it out. It's Locals is the website. It's kind of like Patreon, and you can toss me a few bucks and support the work that I do. Now, here's the first question, and I don't see names here, so I'm sure you've spoken about this before, but can you explain why Israel is allied with Azerbaijan rather than Armenia? Israel's allied with Azerbaijan because Azerbaijan is against Iran. Point, period, end of story. That's it. Israel gets oil from Azerbaijan, so that's helpful, but they may soon be able to replace that with oil from the Leviathan field just offshore Israel. So that may not be as much of it. Obviously, Azerbaijan is an extremist Muslim country. They have been very, very bad to Armenia and are still talking about genociding Armenians with the help of Turkey. So it's a moral failing, I would say, on the part of Israel to stand with Azerbaijan to sell them weapons that they then use to kill Christians in Armenia. I'm not saying Armenia and Israel ought to be allies necessarily. Armenia doesn't really have anything to offer Israel. So from a purely pragmatic point of view, Israel, there are things they can get from Azerbaijan. They can get help from Azerbaijan. But from a moral point of view, Israel should at the very least recognize the Armenian genocide and call it out as what it was. Because the Armenian genocide in 1918 to 22 led to the Holocaust. Hitler actually quoted, he said, basically talking about, well, why not kill all the Jews? Nobody remembers the Armenian genocide. So the world isn't going to say anything about it if we kill all the Jews. And it's just sad that, politics being what they are, and especially Middle Eastern politics, that they got so kind of backwards on that. Will Hamas allow these hostages to be rescued? No, they won't. They have standing orders to execute the hostages if Israel gets anywhere close. I support Israel wholeheartedly, but I can't understand Israel's leftists who pressure the PM regarding a hostage deal instead of addressing Hamas. That is what I refer to as depravity. The Bible says that when you deny the truth, which is the one high God, the most high God, God gives you over to a depraved mind, and you see things that are wrong and as if they were right, things that are right as if they were wrong. And it's the only way I can make it fit in my head is to say, these people, they're intelligent people. They're not stupid. And they have access to all the same media that we do. So if they're Jewish and they're actually calling on their own country to surrender to terrorists, that has to be depravity. And I don't know what else you could say. Okay. What's actually keeping the war from ending at this moment? Chris Can asks. Hamas. Did you miss the part where they still have 20 living hostages in Gaza? All right. Did you miss that, Chris? That's why the war isn't over yet. If the Hamas releases the hostages, the war could be over tomorrow. Wendy Lum says, hey, Chuck, are there any more Arab Christians in Gaza? Yes, there are some. Yahweh Rules says, how do we know these protesters are actually Jewish people? They might be Antifa pretending to be Jewish. Well, I can tell you from having covered a lot of these protests that all of the left-wing causes work together on all of their different things. So if you go to an anti-gun rally, you're going to see LGBTQ plus minus ampersand exclamation point people there because they're just supporting their fellow leftists. So wouldn't surprise me at all if some of the people that are there are not Jewish. That'd be no surprise whatsoever. And I would tend to believe that the majority of the people who are Jewish are there. They're ethnically Jewish, but they're not religious Jews. I didn't see any Haredim there in that crowd. I'm not saying that religious Jews can't be leftists. Some of them are. There are people who claim to be Christians who go to church every Sunday who are leftists. I used to go to church with some of those people. So, and I would just say they're confused. They're confused. I mean, if you're trying to hold two things in and say both of these things are true, but they're mutually exclusive, then you got a problem with your brain. That's a problem with you. That's a you problem. And that's what these Jews are doing. They're saying, I'm Jewish, but I want the Jewish state to be destroyed. How do you reconcile that? I don't know. John Boyhas says CNN covered the hostage video. I did not see that they did. I know the New York Times did not. The AP did not cover it until they put up the interview with that father, because the father was saying, things that were not exactly friendly to Israel. And that's the only reason the AP put that up. Wendy asks, what or how would John Spencer describe the current state of Gaza? What do you think he would recommend to the Israelis? I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to speak for John Spencer. Fusefire says, Bibi's not elected again, given your understanding of the Israelis. Is the people so hungry for peace? Will they be willing to sign a peace treaty quickly? Most people in Israel are not hungry for peace. They're hungry for victory. And so peace would be great, but victory is essential. And that's what they're asking for. Mike Whiskey says, or Wisco says, hey, Chuck, do you believe there will be a two-state solution? No, I do not, because neither side wants it. Hamas doesn't want it. Israel doesn't want it. Jeff Beal says, do you think that another large-scale attack will happen to the Jewish people, as Hillel Fuld predicted? Yes. Hillel Fuld lays out a very good case for another major attack on Jewish people somewhere in the world. Probably not in Israel, more like in Europe or the United States. I talked to Hillel today personally, and he's going to come on the podcast with me here in a week or so. Just stay tuned for that. We'll talk more about it then. Smokin' Doge, a question. Have you ever done any research to see how the IDF was formed? They used to cause chaos way before they put on those uniforms and patches. I'm not really sure what you're talking about there. Sorry. Why is DNA testing illegal in Israel? Don't want to know your history. I don't believe it is illegal in Israel. That sounds like propaganda to me. Will the U.S. get involved in the Gaza real war and finish this? President Trump probably will not send U.S. troops to get involved. Now, we are involved. We have over 1,000 troops on the ground in Israel right now that are assisting in this war. We have ships in the Gulf that are assisting in this war. We have SIGINT assets overhead, meaning drones and satellites and things like that, that are giving intelligence to Israel. So we have troops involved, and even troops in harm's way involved in this. But are we going to send the Marines into Gaza to clear out Gaza? There's no need for us really to do that. Israel should be able to handle it. It's just going to take time and patience. The reason that it's taken them this long is because virtually every building in Gaza is booby-trapped. Every road has IEDs on it, and they have to move very, very slowly and carefully to keep from getting killed. Ron asks, is it possible to separate the women and children from the conflict zone? Israel has made some attempts to do that, kind of, but the men won't go for that. And I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't go for that if I was, in a situation like that. And they said, oh, we're going to take your wife and daughters from you and take them someplace away from you. I would be like, yeah, no, you're not. Over my dead body. So I don't blame Gazan men for not wanting to part with their wives and children. But if Israel has got to get, there's still a lot of military age males in Gaza. And a lot of them, the majority of them even, are not planning to fight Israel. Like that fat, restaurant guy. He's not planning on fighting. He's not going to pick up a rifle. But suffice it to say, Israel has got to do something, and separating them temporarily might actually, or at least, I don't know. I mean, that's a tough nut to crack, isn't it? Smoking Joe question says, people who think it started on October 7th, have you heard of the Nakba in 1948 when they created Israel and displaced 700,000 people? Of course, I've heard of the Nakba. And you know that Israel did not displace those people, that other Arab nations like Egypt and Jordan told those people to leave because they were planning to attack Israel and wipe it out. The problem is they lost that war in 1948 and another Six-Day War in the 1960s, etc. They lost every war against Israel. And so the people who left in the Nakba were convinced to leave by Arab countries, not by Israelis. There are still Arabs living in Israel today who did not leave, who chose not to leave in 1948. How do you explain that? If you're one of those people who believes that Israel drove out all those Palestinians, how do you explain Judea and Samaria and Hebron? How do you explain East Jerusalem? How do you explain the Arab Israelis who vote and work in hospitals and serve in the Knesset and things like that? How do you explain all that? You can't, because Israel did not drive out all the Arabs when they took over in 1948. Victor Lopez says, believe, is that in order to end terrorism, we must end with Islam? What's your opinion? Well, I mean, you're not going to get rid of Islam. That's my opinion. So again, that to say, well, if we want to get rid of terrorism, we just have to get rid of Islam, is the same kind of Pollyannic pie in the sky thought exercise as saying, well, we just need to surrender to Hamas and then they'll be nice to us. Okay, so it's dumb to talk about that. Chimmy says, just started listening. Why doesn't Israel allow Al Jazeera in? Because Al Jazeera was giving away military, they were there at the beginning of the war, but they were giving away military secrets, airing them on the air and giving them to Hamas. They were telling bad people things that they didn't need to know. And so Israel kicked them out of Israel. Michelle asks, just earlier today, I saw Trey Yingst that was on Fox, reporting on the hunger in Gaza. Why aren't you guys reporting the same thing as far as the hunger being a farce or Hamas driven? The hunger is Hamas driven. There is no shortage of food in Gaza. There are people that are hungry in Gaza, and that's because Hamas wants them hungry. Point, period, end of story. And Trey has taken a big skew to the left recently, and I'm not sure why. Maybe because he got sideways with the IDF when the 12-day war happened with Iran, because he was reporting from the site of where missiles landed in Tel Aviv and stuff, and was giving away information, telling bad people things they didn't need to know. And I think he got slapped by the IDF for that. And since then, he's been on this tear about that's been pretty anti-Israel, and I'm really disappointed, to tell you the truth. Country Boy 31 says, why is the West gone to atheism, rejecting Christian Judeo views, and instead supporting Hamas and embracing Islam in the West? I would chalk that up to public universities, because we've indoctrinated a whole bunch of young people to basically be depraved, to get given over to a depraved mind. Lexi Lime says, do you think the other Gulf countries won't be quietly sending money? They're happy with Israel going into Gaza. They just can't say it. It gets rid of a problem for them. The UAE is sending aid. No, I think that yeah, I mean, okay, I understand what you're saying now. I think I would tend to agree. I think that the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and a lot of other countries, Qatar, are going to be very happy for Israel to pick up most of the tab for rebuilding Gaza and caring for Gazans, because they're going to have to feed them and house them and everything for the foreseeable future. But Israel is saying this is the only way we can get our hostages back. So we're going to have to do it. But I think, yeah, those other Arab countries are going to be like, yeah, that saves us a bunch of money. So let's let Israel do that. Stanley Barton says, why does Gaza need to be rebuilt? That's my question. Why can't Israel just take Gaza? Isn't it their land anyway? It is. They have to give the Palestinians some place to live, and they don't want to live among the Palestinians because they keep trying to kill them. The Palestinians keep trying to kill Jews whenever they get close to them. So they have to be separated. Like, you can't have nice things. You've got to go over there, right? Israel is a safe, modern, beautiful country, and Gaza is not. Why? Because the Gazans can't get over their hatred for Israel. End of story. Jokia says, why not put it up for sale by plots? Then whoever buys those plots are responsible for development. it's a beautiful piece of land. No, it's not a beautiful piece of land. It's a wasteland. Even before everything got blown up, it was a wasteland. The southern part of Israel is the Negev desert, and it is horrifically hot and dry and dusty, and it's hard to grow things. And only Israelis could turn it into an oasis, and they did up until they left in 2005. They were forced to leave by the Israeli government. So somebody else is asking, why don't they just let Israel and Western investors rebuild a beautiful resort area with hotels and casinos? Well, obviously President Trump has talked about that, and Netanyahu has said, that's not necessarily a bad idea. But just remember, whatever they build there, the Gazans are going to inhabit. So if you're building resorts and casinos, the only people that'll be going to those resorts and casinos are Palestinians in Gaza, because nobody else is going to Gaza on vacation, I promise. So anyway, Almost Heaven, West Virginia says, where are you going to next? I'm going to Kazakhstan next week. What about hostage rescue? Can it work? It's not impossible, but it's highly unlikely, because Hamas has operatives standing there guarding the hostages at all times with orders to shoot the hostages if Israel gets anywhere close. So it's going to be really dicey trying to get them out of there. Samuel Lachaud Sr. says, do you think Bibi has finally had it and they're in the end game ending it? Yeah, well, they're trying to figure out how to end it, and this is what they've come up with. Did I talk about the sponsor? No, because they're not sponsoring today's video. They are sponsoring several videos a week, but today's not one of those days. So thank you very much for all of your questions. Let's see. I think, no, I think we're good. All right. So let's see. We are at an hour and 7 minutes. Thank you, whoever that was. Gil Ram for the 30 shekels. I appreciate that. I could go buy a meal in Gaza with that. That's amazing. Wow. Okay. Well, we need 100 more likes to get to 2,000. So if you would do me a favor and hit that like button before we go, and or on your way out. And I will see you again tomorrow, God willing. Take care.